now I mentioned stress, I'm going to hand it over to Hannah so that she can talk to you a little bit about self-care during final exams.
All right, thanks, Jody. So when Jody and I were originally talking about our meetup for today and thinking about planning for the exam, we started thinking about how sometimes those things can create stress. We are all going through a really challenging time right now, just as it is, let alone when you're a first-time college student and it's the first time you're getting ready for finals and to wrap up your semester. So I actually have a background in social work, which some of you may or may not know. So some of these things are exciting for me to talk about because I don't always get to use that aspect of my work. And I wanted to just also share a few of my personal strategies for dealing with stress and for regulating emotions. So I came across just the other day some great resources that I thought would be really helpful to share with you today around healthy emotion regulation and thinking about self-care. So when we feel stress, it is really easy to spiral and start feeling out of control very quickly. So one of the questions that I like to ask myself and that I think is really helpful to think about is how can we start to tune into our emotions sooner and then shift them in the direction that we want them to go? So, as this quote says in the slide, when we're feeling disappointed or joyful or anxious, what do we do to feel more or less of that feeling, to hang on to that feeling if it's a positive one, or to shift it into something different? And our ability to do that is called emotion regulation. And when we start to get too stressed, it becomes very difficult to regulate that. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some tips for how to address that. So when we start to think about our emotions, it's important to ask ourselves some questions. I struggle personally with anxiety on a daily basis, and I have for a very long time. And I've taken important steps to address it through talking with my doctor, seeing a therapist, taking good care of my physical self, which we're going to talk about more in a moment. But one of the most powerful tools that I have really learned to use is mindfulness, which is simply paying attention on purpose in the present moment and doing that without judgment. And that, I think, is the hardest part, especially for a lot of you who I know work really hard and want to be great at what you do, and for myself as well. And so while sometimes we might think of mindfulness as something like meditation or this sort of formal, sitting in a specific space and having our eyes closed, it doesn't have to be that complex. It's really about asking ourselves, how am I feeling now and how do I want to feel? And then thinking, what can I do or how can I shift my thinking to the direction I want it to go? One of the things that I have found most helpful for me, because sometimes it's really hard to do that when you're in the thick of it. It's really hard to think of a quick way to, I'm feeling anxious, I'm overwhelmed, my thoughts are cluttered, I don't know which direction I'm going, it's hard for me to prioritize. What's a simple way I can do this? So I learned an acronym fairly recently called RAIN. And RAIN reminds me that when I'm feeling that way, I should first recognize the emotions that I'm feeling. So take a moment to say, I think I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed. Then next, the A in RAIN, I'm going to allow myself to feel those emotions. I'm going to say it's okay. I'm not going to push against this. It's all right for me to feel this way. I know I will get through it. And then I'm going to do that investigation piece, which is what some of these questions are. How did I get to this place? What is it that's really making me feel this way? What's fueling my anxiety or my stress or my sadness or my anger? And then the last piece is probably the most important, which is to really nurture yourself and to nurture those feelings. So to say, it's okay. I'm feeling this way in this moment. It's okay for me to feel this way. I know it's going to pass. I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to take a deep breath. And I'm going to think about what is the next step that I need to take to start shifting this mentality. So Tara Brach is a mindfulness expert and psychologist who actually developed RAIN. And I highly recommend you look her up. She has some great YouTube videos on this. And she has a really great book as well called Radical Compassion. But again, just a quick tip for you to think through that pattern of shifting those emotions. But the number one thing, and probably the first thing we should do, is take a deep breath. And I want to just stress that we should not underestimate the power of taking a few deep breaths. It is a physiological response. When we breathe mindfully, when we physically slow our breathing down, it turns off our stress response. It slows down our heart rate. It stops our brain from going a million miles per hour. It stops that fight or flight mechanism in the back of our brain from going crazy and thinking there's a crisis. It really helps us to calm down. And so even if you are in the middle of, a conversation with people and you're feeling that anxiety, just taking 3 deep breaths even will be enough to help you start to shift out of that. But if you're feeling a little bit more, if your emotions are more intense and you need to take some space, I highly recommend you take these 4 steps that are listed here. So remove distractions. We're all on our screens a lot, especially right now. That in and of itself is a distraction. So take a screen break. Get somewhere comfortable. Lie down on the floor. Feeling grounded and feeling that ground beneath you is really, really helpful, especially when you're feeling stressed or anxious. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that, or just pick a spot on a blank wall to kind of tune in on and take 10 deep breaths. Just inhaling and exhaling 10 times. And I can almost guarantee that you will feel better. It's not a miracle. You might not have solved all of your problems, but it's going to help bring you some clarity to think about, okay, what is the next thing I need to do to start shifting my emotions? So mindful breathing, wonderful tool. Definitely keep it in mind. Even when you're in an exam, this is one you can use. You're in an exam, you're in the midst of it, you're starting to panic because you don't know the answer. Take some mindful breaths and you might find some clarity. So in order to do all of this self-regulating and to be mindful and think about our emotions, our minds have to work pretty hard. So it might seem sort of counterintuitive, but I promise you that spending that extra brain power to do those things is going to free up a lot of mental energy that we spend in sort of a negative space or with negative emotions. So how hard our brain can work is totally dependent on how we take care of ourselves. Self-care, I'm sure it's a term you've heard. It gets thrown around a lot. And how it's defined depends entirely on who it applies to. So generally, it's what we do to feel like the best version of ourselves. But that varies from person to person. How I take care of myself and what I find helps me is going to be uniquely different than what it is for you. And so, some of the basic things that we can think about that are pretty broad are moving our bodies. So getting some physical movement. It doesn't have to be a strenuous workout, but getting up, taking a few laps, that's important. Stretching, that's a great way to do that. Eating nutritious food. So have I had some fruits and vegetables in the last couple of days? That's an easy one. The biggest one, drink water, right? Probably none of us drink enough water, especially when we're stressed or we're tired and we think we're reaching for those sugary beverages. Not that there's anything wrong with that every once in a while, but eating nutritious foods is really helpful. Prioritize your sleep. I promise you, pulling an all-nighter is not probably going to give a better outcome for your exam. So if you sleep, that's what's going to make you able to do well and to study and to spend that mental energy. Spend time with your loved ones. I know that's hard right now, but even talking on the phone or, through a virtual call or anybody that you can be with physically, even if it's a pet, that's a really great way to feel that kind of instant surge of positive energy to help get you through. So these are a few broad examples, but if we go to the next slide, I put some sort of out of the box examples, some that I've used in the past, things that, you can take as a few ideas. So I won't go through all of them, but a few that I really love are playing a favorite playlist and dancing while I make dinner. I do that sometimes. I don't have to do the dancing part, but listening to music is a really great way for our brains to feel those positive endorphins and to feel good and to heal itself. Asking someone to help you. So if you are, you're trying to get your homework done, you also are trying to get dinner on the table, you have to run a few errands, asking for help is a really good way to take care of yourself. And it's not selfish, it's you being an advocate. Laying down for a few minutes midday and just breathing. We kind of talked about that one. Especially when I was working in my office and not working remotely, I would do this every day. I would eat my lunch, and after I ate, I shut my door. I would lay on a yoga mat on the floor and take about 5 minutes to take some deep breaths. And I would feel instantly refreshed for the afternoon. Pick the easiest thing on your list and do it first. This is one of my favorites. A lot of people say pick the hardest thing on your list and do it first to cross it off. That does not work for me. I have found that if I can get a couple of really easy things done, it starts getting my momentum going and builds up my confidence to tackle the really challenging thing that I am probably avoiding, because I will be the first to admit that procrastination is a habit of mine, and it's one that I've embraced, but that I have, a love-hate relationship with. And then one of my favorites as well, which is something that I recommend to a lot of people and is really kind of a fun activity, is to make a self-care box or a self-care kit with some of your favorite things. So having a space where, if it's making yourself a cup of tea, lighting a candle that just smells really good, a coloring book. I know there's tons of adult coloring books out there. Maybe it's a note that you've written to yourself. So having a place where, I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to pull this out of the drawer or out of the closet, I'm going to make that cup of tea and I'm going to light my candle. And I just know that that little ritual is going to make me feel better. So again, these are just some ideas that you can use to think about what you need to do to take care of yourself. And then the last thing I just wanted to say and remind you all of is that your mental health matters. It matters. It matters immensely. It matters to me, to Jody, to your instructors and staff at West Shore, to your peers. It matters. One of my favorite quotes, and one that I remind myself often a lot, is that you can't pour from an empty cup. If you have no energy, if you aren't taking good care of yourself, you are not going to be able to give the time, energy, and brain power that you need to your academic life, let alone to your social life, your personal life, etc. So putting your mental and your physical health first is super important. And I want to reiterate that I know it's hard, but please do not hesitate to reach out if you need support. We all need it. We all need it more than we ask for. And you are your own best advocate. So it's really important that you keep that in mind. I put a link here. You heard a little bit about this, I think back in September, but I put a link to West Shore's Counseling Corner. So this is where you can learn more information about the counseling and support services that are available for mental health support at West Shore. There's a schedule on there. You can make an appointment with Ann Jensen. Her email and phone number are below. And then there are just some other resources and services as you scroll down, a suicide prevention line, some self-assessments that you can take if you're kind of concerned about your mental health, and then how you can be aware of your feelings and the things that are going on. So make sure that you check that out, keep it bookmarked. These are free services. They are free to you. And it is really important that you remember that they're yours to utilize. So as I take a deep breath, because I'm getting excited and going forward, make sure we take care of ourselves.